Shadow introduced himself to Shurshur, and right away, the woman began acting seductive, cupping her chest and complimenting how attractive and dominant he seemed. Yet deep down, she was a little let down. She had hoped Shadow would be a foreigner with certain enhanced features. Still, she couldn't be sure until she investigated personally. The two men accompanying her were also thrilled to meet Shadow, amazed that he had dealt over 40,000 in damage, a staggering feat for the top global player. But before they could finish their greetings, Shadow struck without a second thought and split their heads open. Since he couldn't understand their language, their chatter irritated him. He assumed they were insulting him and decided to eliminate them just in case. Even though they were actually praising him, Shadow didn't care. He quietly muttered an apology to Shurshur and told her that from now on, to prevent any future misunderstandings, she should only speak their native tongue. Otherwise, he wouldn't hesitate to act again. Without wasting time, he asked to start the trade. But first, he told Shurshur to dress properly. Oddly, this excited her more. She found it thrilling that someone seemed immune to her charms. She wondered what was going through Fang's mind and thought Shadow was some kind of oddball who didn't want to stare at her body. But she loved it. Shadow then clarified that while he had the target's head in real life, he couldn't carry it into the game as an item. However, if she wanted proof, he could show it to her outside the game. Shurshur, impressed, trusted Shadow's power and believed he wouldn't lie. She paid him 1,500 tradable days of lifespan. After receiving the payment, Shadow turned to go, but the girl called him again. When he turned back, she was showing even more cleavage, suggesting they work long-term, her money and his skills. She told him she had a new assassination target and invited him to her place that night, promising to fulfill any desire he had. Instead of reacting, Shadow asked who the target was and what the reward would be. Seeing his interest, Shurshur decided to hold back details and insisted he visit her place later, promising a much bigger reward than before, and told him to meet her at the magical city harbor that night. As she logged off, Shadow was a bit surprised at how bold she was, calling him to a private harbor, which she probably bought just for secrecy. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the officer Shadow had pinned at the safe zone. One couldn't believe Shadow had the nerve to kill him but consoled himself, thinking he'd earn rewards from Shurshur for bringing them together. In front of Lin, the white-haired officer, he acted loyal, calling anyone who teamed with Shadow fools. He urged Lin to lead everyone to claim their tradable lifespan so they could act later. But Lin wasn't buying it. Something felt off. She didn't believe Shadow would ally with the Speed Gang. And if he had, then she would have to eliminate him, even if it cost her life. She clearly understood the vast power gap between them. She hadn't even seen him when he assassinated the officer. That night, Shadow arrived at the harbor and boarded Shurshur's private yacht. Wearing a hood to conceal his identity, he introduced himself again as Shadow and said he came to meet the ace of spades, Shurshur. Everyone was stunned to see the legendary player. The captain was ordered to set sail, and as the ship began moving, a voice called out from behind. Turning, Shadow saw Shurshur in a tight, revealing outfit that hugged every curve. She was struck by how enigmatic he appeared, but quickly got playful. Shadow, unfazed, immediately asked who the target was. Shurshur pouted and said he had no sense of fun. She noted how rare it was for a beautiful woman like her to face a man who wasn't affected in the slightest. She dismissed the serious topic and toasted to the enchanting spring night, wanting to savor the moment. To her surprise, Shadow downed the drink in one gulp and stayed quiet. Shurshur thought her plan was working. She gently pushed him onto a couch and asked how he felt, then confessed that the wine had a special formula used by her foreign lovers, boosting male stamina 100-fold. Anyone who drank it supposedly fell under her control, and she assumed Shadow would be no exception. Flushed with excitement, she imagined all she could do to him. Telling him not to worry, she planned to take him to the peak of ecstasy. Keeping his hood on for mystery, she fantasized about how he might look, rambling about how magnificent men could come from her own country. As she began slowly undressing, the screen fades to black due to censorship. She pulled down his pants and was stunned by the size, feeling the heat radiating from his body. Just then, A loud voice demanded Shadow show himself. Before she could react, she was instantly killed. What was hot moments ago turned into flames. A hand grabbed the hidden necklace from her neck, a rare pendant that generated a shield every 300 seconds. The man who took it was none other than Fong. It had all been a trap. Stunned, Shirshir asked how he was still alive. Hadn't Shadow killed him? She thought Shadow was too strong to fail. Fong revealed the truth. He had been Shadow all along. Completely shocked, she could only wonder, if Fong is Shadow, then who was the hooded guy with me? We see that the hooded figure was actually one of Shadow's undead servants. Relishing the attention Shirshir gave him, knowing she wouldn't survive now, she bashed her head into the floor repeatedly and began calling Fong Daddy. And with that, this episode was officially not for kids. Begging for mercy, she offered her lifespan and promised eternal loyalty. But Fong was annoyed and asked about the 5 foreigners she had been with. Shirshir, crying and sounding foolish, promised to spill everything if only he'd spare her. But before she could finish, her head was twisted 180 degrees, ending her story. Fong then received a notification that he'd gained 659 years of lifespan. Though Fong had hoped to catch the foreigners with her, they weren't around, so he used her phone to call the police and avoid suspicion. Soon, multiple patrol boats arrived, responding to a report of mass killings aboard a yacht. One of the dead was heir to the Quinn group. The informant mentioned the killer's skills matched those of Shadow from the game. A search team was quickly sent to investigate. One officer cursed Shadow aloud but secretly mourned the loss of Shirshir's melons. He declared that such a brazen assassin was mocking the law and that once they boarded, he'd use his search ability to locate Shadow and have all forces open fire the moment he was found. Inside the yacht, they discovered Shirshir's lifeless body. An early autopsy revealed a broken spine as the cause of death, with unidentified DNA and burn traces in her mouth. The officer suggested Shadow might have done naughty things before killing her. He introduced himself as Nan, nicknamed Giant, who had a skill allowing him to find a killer's location for 5 minutes by touching the corpse. But right after using the skill, he realized Shadow was already behind him. Before he could draw his weapon, Giant was eliminated. All his hopes of grabbing oranges were crushed. Officer Lin, stunned, activated a magic shield and accused Shadow of killing the investigator, warning that they were now enemies. Just then, a strange voice told everyone not to panic. Giant had been feeding information to Shirshir and was a traitor. The proof was on his phone. An officer checked and found private chats between Giant and Shirshir. Lin grabbed the phone and saw photos of them kissing intensely, questioning who even records such things. Though amused, she knew Shadow had been telling the truth. Last time, when he had wiped everyone out, it was to gain Shirshir's trust. He later used that trust to find her in the real world, settle the score, and report everything, trapping Giant in the process. Shadow once again proved himself to be fearsome. Lin realized it was lucky he wasn't against the authorities, or the results would be catastrophic. Suddenly remembering she'd once fired at him, Lin wondered if he still held a grudge. But that didn't matter. She had to show her sincerity. Speaking loudly, she thanked him and apologized for earlier. To prove her goodwill, she pulled out her gun and shot herself in the leg. Crying from the pain, she stopped others from helping and told Shadow she'd taken a bullet for him too, asking him not to change sides. Some officers thought this was excessive, but Lin insisted they had no idea how terrifying Shadow really was. Meanwhile, Fong, now invisible, couldn't comprehend how far Lin would go, hurting herself just to avoid being Shadow's enemy. Yet, as a future leader of the magic metropolis, she was clearly capable and brave. The story then returned to the game, where Shadow's foolish sister was helping another adventurer defeat monsters. When he asked her to heal him, she accidentally healed the monster instead. The man was stunned by her stupidity and began to wonder whose side she was even on. Suddenly, a monster resembling a man-eating plant devoured both of them, and they were transported back to the safe zone. As the girl cried, she foolishly blamed Shadow again, wondering why he kept targeting her. Maybe it was revenge for Song, she thought. But this time, the adventurer had enough. He slammed her head into the ground and called her an idiot, saying she wasn't some goddess that Shadow would bother targeting. He then explained that they were wiped by a platinum boss, the headless assassin, and asked if she even checked the system alert. Her misfired healing had triggered the boss's aggro. Furious, he warned that if she were assigned to his team again, he'd quit for good. Xiao was bawling because even a small punch hurt her. Then, two massive legs landed in front of them. The adventurer turned and froze. The boss had followed them to the safe zone and now stood before them. Not wasting time, the man fled for his life, leaving the girl behind, frozen in fear.